Welcome to the mbaMission podcast, where every week we discuss different MBA application components and give our expert guidance on everything business school admissions related.
Hi, everyone. This is Harold Simansky with the mbaMission podcast. I'm coming to you now on a very fraught day, as Harvard Business School interview invitations are coming out literally right now as we do this podcast. Given this, I could not think of a better person to have on the podcast than my colleague, Executive Director here at mbaMission, Devi Vallabhaneni. Devi has a very... Hey, Devi, how are you?
So happy to be here.
Happy to be here as well. Devi, before we even jump into the discussion around the interviews, take a minute just to tell everybody about your own relationship to Harvard Business School from the time you were a student there, and then as well as some of the work you did for the admissions committee.
Sure, absolutely. So I applied in 1994, or I should say to start in 1995. I take that back. I actually applied in 1995 in the third round, because at that point, there was no such thing as the internet or admissions consultants to tell you not to apply in the third round. And so I just applied when I felt ready.
Yeah.
So, there's this thing called just, following your intuition.
Yeah, no, that's great.
And so,
Devi, what had you been doing?
Up until that point, I worked at Arthur Andersen for 4 years in their Chicago, Singapore, and Hong Kong offices, the consulting side. So not on the audit or traditional accounting side, but on their consulting. So great experience. And I always knew I wanted to go to business school. And so I thought, well, I'll apply to HBS. And the rest is history.
Yes.
I still remember my interview from 1995. It was with an alum in Chicago. Their model at that point was completely different. So, I'm sure you could interview in Boston if you're in that area, but they didn't expect you to travel like in terms of now. It's more of like they said, this is your interviewer. You have to coordinate with them. And that was it.
Right.
So completely different. Those things may be different, but I still remember the mood, the emotions of the day. And I still remember most of the conversations, even though it's been quite some time since then.
Right.
And I remember leaving the interview thinking, wow, that was the best I could have done. I remember leaving the interview, like in the lobby, getting into a taxi. And I remember thinking that now I know what it means to do your absolute best.
That's really great.
I still remember that feeling. And that's the feeling I want for my clients. And that's why I do what I do, because when you are ready, when you have done what it takes to prepare. Because when you prepare and you are comfortable with your own self and stories, you're ready for anything. Right. It's when you don't do the work that you're fearful. And so do you want to show up for the interview fearful, or do you want to show up for the interview feeling ready for a conversation, ready for whatever? And that's exactly why I do what I do. Preparation is not just about the questions. So many people have, think, oh, if I just, download or review like 100 questions that I think they're going to come up in an interview, I'm fine. That is not preparation.
No, that makes sense. So Devi, even before we jump in, if I understand correctly, you are actually doing interviews on behalf of Harvard Business School.
Yes. In the early 2000s, I was an alumni interviewer, like the person who interviewed me. And they would pair me up with whoever. And at that point, it was so very structured. They even said, hey, can you ask a few of these types of questions? Because that's what they wanted to know. And so it was a different model even then. And in the early teens, or in the early 2010s, I don't know how you call that decade, it'll changed again. And it's now everything is centralized. There is an HBS admissions board. That's what I was a part of. And and everybody's trained. It's professional interviewers. They know what they're looking for. They know what good sounds like, right? Yeah. They know what great sounds like. They know what sounds like.
Right. No, I can understand that. So even before we talk about how people prepare, like what does great sound like? What are you actually looking for as you think about the North Star? How do I want to sound? How do I want to be in the room? Those sorts of things.
I think great sounds like someone who knows the breadth and depth of what they've done. are able to relay it in a summary fashion versus a technical fashion. Oh, I did this model. Oh, and then the EBITDA had to be 35.57, percent, and it needed to go to 37. I mean, you've just lost somebody, right? When you're speaking in technicalities. So can you relay at least your professional experience in a cohesive, cogent manner that anybody can understand? Or are you just speaking with your colleagues? Right? Big difference. That's number one. Number two, what's the strategic stuff of what you've done versus the technical stuff? And I think so many people get caught up in technicalities. Versus the strategic nature of what they've done. I think the other thing is somebody who's self-aware. It's really hard to be self-aware if you haven't had that level of practice with somebody else, right? And then I think that's what we do at mbaMission really well, is really probing 5 levels deeper of why, right? And all of that comes through in the interview. All of a sudden, if you've never done that, and all of a sudden you sign up to prepare with me, it's going to feel like you're drinking out of a fire hose because you hadn't done that stuff to get you ready.
No, that makes sense. In fact, we're going to, take a pause here and just to do a little mbaMission commercial. So let me start off very quickly with folks. If you're not familiar with mbaMission, by all means, go onto our website. We have a huge amount of material. Much of it is about interviewing. We have some very specific information about HBS. We also offer what's called a 30-minute consult, where sign up with any one of us consultants, me, Debbie, whoever it is, and we'll talk to you about anything practically for 30 minutes. Beyond that, we have really a whole series of different offerings, starting with On Track. We also have some hourly services, or our start to finish package, which really takes you through the entire process from beginning to end. However, if you have gotten an interview with Harvard Business School, we have a couple of very special offerings. One is to work with someone like me, what I would say something of a quick overview of how to approach a HBS interview. However, if you really want a very in-depth, deep understanding of the admissions of the interview process, and you really want to be drilled left and right, then you sign up with Debbie. Debbie, take a minute here just to tell everyone about what your services are, and then we'll dig in a little bit deeper.
Sure, no problem. We deliberately call it the HBS Interview Intensives because that's exactly what they are. I only know one way to interview for HBS, which is the way I did it when I was at HBS. So I bring that same methodology, that same mindset, that same kind of standards, like what we were talking about, what great looks like, what good looks like, and what looks like. I practice it as if prepare for a couple of hours, get in the mindset of the client. It's the same exact way that I would have prepared when I was at HBS. And then a half hour of the real thing in terms of just like the HBS interview. And then the rest of the time is for homework. And homework could mean, hey, you know what? I don't understand what you do. Let's really drill down on some projects. Your goals may not make sense. So what are your goals? I might drill. Everybody's homework is going to be different.
Right.
For somebody, it could be, how they present themselves. It could be about style. Although I don't critique style as much. I really care about substance. There's so much leeway for style, but very little leeway for substance.
That makes sense. So, Debbie, what's the first thing I do? I'm lucky enough I get a Harvard Business School interview. And again, I strongly encourage everyone to go, meet with Debbie. It's too important. First of all, let's pause. Do I understand correctly that a Harvard Business School interview, unlike most schools, truly is make or break?
Yes.
Okay, it is going to be.
You can't get in without an interview. You can't get in without doing well on the interview. Not even like, oh, I just skated by. No.
Absolutely. So now, recognizing the chips here, what do? I am very joyous. I get that HBS interview invite. What's the first thing I should be doing, and how should I be thinking about this?
Well, it's so funny because there's that joy, and then for most type A people, that joy lasts 10 minutes, and then they say, "Oh my God, what do I do right? What do I do next?" So now we're in that stage. If you're an mbaMission client, work with your consultant, right? In terms of first to have a game plan and go through the mocks with your consultant, and then if you still think you need prep, then work with me. In terms of maybe there are certain things that you always are scared of. Maybe there's something in your application that you just don't know how to communicate. Last year, we had a client who, had a couple of unfortunate things during college, and he was so scared of how to talk about them during the interview. And so we made sure to practice. Some people, if you're in PE, you still have to be able to talk about your deals and whatnot. And some people rely too much on the finance and not enough on the people. So it's those balanced responses. And so it doesn't matter what your background is, everybody needs to practice. So if you're an mbaMission client, work with your consultant, have a game plan for your own interview. And then if both of you feel like you still need practice, that's when you come to me.
Right. Absolutely. As well as folks who are not mbaMission clients.
Correct.
They reach out to us, and what do we do? What do we suggest?
Yep. If you're not an mbaMission client, then I urge you even more to prep with us. And it depends on your budget and it depends on your time frame. Working with me, what I would suggest is, we offer different packages in terms of like 1 interview, 2, 3, 4, up to 5. And I think, and I'm saying this off of however many years I've been doing this at mbaMission, people underestimate how many sessions they need with me. So I just say that try to maximize your budget, because number one, we will respect and maximize your budget too. And number 3, it's about reps. You did how many drafts for your essays? You don't be naive to think, 1 mock interview and I'm done.
Right.
And you think of each mock as a draft that gets better and better and better. And so that's why I think it's important to practice with a professional, like somebody on mbaMission. And a lot of people say, I'm just going to practice with my colleagues, or I have a lot of friends who are students or alumni, and that's fine. You may be one of the rare people that could be enough. However, your friends and current students and alumni and colleagues are not professional interviewers, number 1. Number 2, they're not admissions people. They may not know how to frame your entire story. They're just critiquing you on that little blip that you just relayed. So that's different, right? And so that's what I mean by the difference between, prepping with your friends, there's nothing wrong, but I wouldn't rely on just them, because you're just repeating bad form. It's like, when you work out, with weights, you could have bad form, right? And so you work out with a trainer to work out with good form that you can then translate into yourself. So think of it the same way here.
Right. I will say, Debbie, when I was first getting trained at mbaMission how to conduct an HBS interview, what I was really surprised about is, first of all, our process. If I'm interviewing you, and if you're my client, I do not create the questions. I have a colleague of mine create the questions for the simple reason that we need somebody who is somewhat distant, who is seeing you through your application, is not seeing you in other ways, is seeing you through your application. At that point, also recognizing everything is on the table.
Yes.
There is no piece of it that
Correct.
could not be asked about, and sort of the hand waving that every application has, whether it's, third bullet from the bottom, or somewhere else in the essay,
or that little line in the online short answer is your biggest challenge for that particular job. All of it.
Right. Absolutely. So I frequently tell my folks is, first off, you have to know your resume, application, short answers inside out. I think that's really the starting point before you even think more about it. And I think that really reflects that HBS really wants to know everything about you, if I understand correctly.
Yes, they really do. It's the person as well as the professional.
Yeah. How much of it, Debbie, is gauging people in terms of how they're going to perform in the classroom? Again, HBS is a case method. Is a case method classroom. Is that a piece of it?
Not really. There's so much more to evaluating. Does this person have anything to say? What have they done? What's the depth, right? Then evaluating them in the case method is a derivative of that, but not a primary thing.
Okay. It's funny. I will frequently, as we said earlier, I do these 30-minute consults. And by the way, everyone can sign up with a 30-minute consult for me or Debbie at the mbaMission website. By all means, they're free. This is not a piece of the sales process. I'm always stunned by people coming to me with during the 30-minute consult and saying to me something like, "Oh yeah, I'm not considering a Harvard. I'm not a Harvard type." Devi, is there a Harvard type? What do you see?
Nope, there isn't a Harvard type. I think if there's any commonality, right, amongst people who get in, is that, and I think we talked about this on the previous podcast that you, Jessica, and I did, is that they've maxed out their lives, personal, professional, community, dreams, setbacks, everything is maxed out. And they've done so much and seen so much, accomplished so much. And that's what I mean by they have something to say.
Yep. No, that makes sense.
You know what I mean? They have something to say that's interesting that other people can learn from, that and everything. So that's a commonality, but that's not necessarily, that can't be manufactured.
Right. That makes sense. And Devi, of course, this brings the next question, and this is always the case. We're going to have clients that simply did not get an interview. What do you see as some of the biggest reasons people either don't get interviews, or this notion here of why they simply not be, quote, HBS right? How do you?
There's so many reasons. Yeah. There's so many. So first of all, on the extremes, it's like, grades, test scores. That's an easy one, right? In terms of their academic ability is usually one of the biggest reasons. Because HBS is an intensive academic program, right? It's very rigorous. It's very intense. You have to have analytical skills, reading comprehension skills. Like you have to be able to analyze information like that. Analyze and be intuitive about that as well. It's not just the left brain, having that IQ, EQ balance.
Right.
Then it could be, so that's one bucket. I think another bucket is too many people want to pursue the same thing. I think, I'm sure this year they're going to get so many applications. I want to do AI and I want to do this and I want to do that. Right. And a lot of it is fluffing up your goals. And that have no clue to what you want to do in terms of So I think a lot of it is going to be just what professional direction are you heading and can you actually get there? Or is it just you're putting down whatever?
No, that makes sense.
And then I think there's another pool of applicants where, you know what, you're probably really good and it's just a numbers game.
Right.
And those are the hardest. Those are absolutely the hardest.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I'll tell you, I've done Ding reviews. Obviously, we all do a lot of Ding reviews. And I remember this one example of a guy, really terrific in a lot of ways, architect. He said he wanted to go into real estate private equity, had an interview, and then was rejected. He thought it went well. And then I asked him very simply, well, what do you mean by real estate private equity? And he was stunned. He was stumped. And the reality is that during the application process, you sort of get tied up in terms of what you mean about things. You sort of take it for granted. You don't think twice about it. And it's only in the interview where you have to start really pulling these things apart and really being able to say, here's exactly what I want to do. And here's why I want to do it. And and I think
that's exactly right. So I think goals have a lot to do with it.
Yeah. Now, Devi, as we discussed on our previous podcast, for folks who are applying round 2, by all means, go back and listen to our HBS podcast with my colleague Devi, with my colleague Jessica Schlar, as we sort of dug into the new HBS application. Given the interviews that you've seen, how do you think the new essays, new application has affected things? Did you feel like different results? Are there new conclusions about the new HBS essays?
No, I think the same people who I thought would get in got in.
Okay. It's that simple.
Yeah, not just from a profile perspective, it's also that level of introspection, right? If you treat each draft so mechanical, if you treat your essays as so mechanical, it's going to be hard to get that voice to shine through. But the people who got interviews today of my clients are the ones who truly use this to be self-reflective and who iterated diligently and had a lot to say. Usually the people who got in had more stories than they knew what to do with for each question.
Right. No,
that's what I mean by maxing out. That's what I mean by you should have so many stories that you want to put on the page, but it just doesn't fit. That's what I mean by maxing out. Versus having one or two stories that you have to stretch and stretch and stretch to make it sound, oh my God, I did something so monumental.
Right. No, that certainly makes sense. I have to tell you, at the end of the day, a Harvard Business School essay can talk about anything, but it's interesting. Mm-hmm. That's what I tell folks. They are essays you want to continue to read. You want to leave those essays thinking like, I don't know everything about you, but what I know, I'm really excited to hear more. I think that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, Debbie, so right now it is September 30th. Let's get to some basics here. And that is, does it matter when you schedule your interview for? How about the post-interview reflection? That's something that in many ways people are scared of. That they're like, oh my God, I'm scared. What do I do now? Is there a secret formula here?
Yeah. So before we get to that, I'll tell you what shouldn't even go into your mind. Where you interview in terms of remote, in person, or whatever. Base it on your budget. Base it on what you can handle. If you have you have to be in 3 different places because of a big project, this, that, whatever, do it virtual. If you have the time in your calendar to go to Boston, then go to Boston. If it's in your budget, time and money budget, right? Then travel to a local city or travel to Boston. But we can't tell you, oh, you'll have a better shot here or better shot there. At the end of the day, the team at HBS, they are professional enough to know that there are so many other factors. Do not be forced to do something where it's uncomfortable for you. That's number one. Number 2, the interview is the same. The methodology is the same if it's in person or virtual. Again, all else equal, if you can go to Boston, obviously you see more of the school, especially if you haven't visited the school. So that's the reason they have so much programming during interview days to give you an insight into the school.
Yep, that makes sense.
It's not because it's going to tip in your favor per se.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So then going into the post-interview reflection, which yes, it does cause some people some stress. Do not even think about it now. Every minute that you spend on the PIR right now is a minute wasted. And the reason is your interview hasn't happened. You don't even know what the prompt is. Right.
You don't even know what the prompt is. Yep.
So don't worry about the derivative. Focus on maximizing the interview.
Right.
Again, if you're an mbaMission client, you will have a game plan with your consultant. Right. If you're not an mbaMission client and you work with me, you'll have a game plan for the PIR. You're fine.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's sort of amazing to me, Debbie. I will get when people leave their interviews. When people leave their interviews, we immediately say to them, sit down, in the library, wherever it is, sit down and just start writing down what happened during your interview. Mm-hmm. Think to yourself, okay, is there anything else you want to tell them? Mm-hmm. Let's start. I tell folks, start with a thank you. That's always a pretty good place to start.
That's right.
At that point.
Yeah, first principles.
Yeah, absolutely. Then. Debbie, before we get to some closing remarks here, okay, so here at mbaMission, if you're not familiar with us, start with all of our online resources. Many, many, many are free. It'll take you hours to go through all of them, including interview prep material, including our HBS interview guide. If you want to start dipping your toe, if this is early in the process for you, by all means, try our track. It's wonderful. We just rolled it out. If you want to work more closely with someone, you can certainly do some hours with a consultant, but we always recommend we get the results, the best results by far, with a start to finish package. At that point, then, if you have gotten an interview at HBS, you will work with your consultant who did the start to finish package with you to really get you prepared for an HBS interview. We bring in other members of our team to help, and it is really a very comprehensive process. For those of you who have not worked with us, or for those of you who feel like they need more prep and your consultant will help you think more about that, you can start working with Debbie. And Debbie, as you've heard, has a huge amount of experience with HBS interviews. No one is better. She's a wonderful resource, not just for the individual clients, but our entire team. And by all means, if you want to get started, go to our website right now. And if you have gotten that HBS interview, I really encourage you. It is a make or break interview. This is it. This is your spot. Now, honestly, all chips in the table, just take the commitment.
Yeah, what I always say, since this was the year of the Olympics, is, it's like you got invited to the Olympics today, right?
Right.
However, at the Olympics, there's gold, silver, and bronze. Here, it's only gold or home. That's it.
Yep.
There is no second place here.
Yep. Absolutely. Do everything you can to grab that gold, by all means.
That's exactly right. That's exactly. I just, it's like everyone dreams of this moment. So why don't you maximize this moment?
Exactly. I think that's really it. And Devi, any final words of either recommendations, advice for someone who is thrilled today, they got an HBS interview? Any last bits of advice?
You have to view it as another step. And you have to use the same diligence that you use for your application to then get to this. In some ways, you have to forget your entire application and start the whole process again. And I think that's when you become realistic versus resting on your laurels about, I must have had a great application.
Right.
No, all of this means is that they want to learn more about you.
Yep.
It doesn't mean that you're halfway there.
Right.
It just means that they want to learn more about you. So the same methodology, the same diligence, the same introspection, the same kind of looking inwards, right, is going to be important. It's a different skill set. You don't have, the benefit of another person reading your essays. That's it. One state, like it's just one go.
Right. Absolutely. This is terrific. Listen, Devi, really appreciate your insights here. And again, if you have not listened to other podcasts, by all means, check out our earlier podcast about the Harvard Business School application with Devi and my colleague, Jessica Sklar. This is Harold Simansky here for the mbaMission podcast. And good luck, everybody, particularly those of you who got Harvard Business School interviews today.
Thanks so much, Harold. And thank you to everybody who's listening.
Thank you, Devi. I'll speak to you again.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening to the mbaMission podcast. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts so you don't miss an episode. We wish you the best of luck with your MBA applications and look forward to helping you on your journey to business school.